His name was Friedrich. I killed his brother. I didn't know that when I met him in a cafe in Cologne in March of 1919. The war had been over for 4 months, and I was part of the occupation force, one of thousands of American soldiers stationed in the Rhineland to make sure the Germans didn't start the whole thing over again. We occupied their cities, ate their food, walked their streets like conquerors. That's what we were told we were. Conquerors, winners. But I didn't feel like a winner when I sat across from Friedrich Weber in that cafe and realized we'd been trying to kill each other 6 months earlier. I felt like a fraud, like a murderer, like everything they'd told us about the Hun and the Kaiser and making the world safe for democracy was a lie. And the proof was sitting right there, drinking ersatz coffee and crying. I'm 43 years old now. I've had a quarter century to think about that meeting, to try to make sense of it. Some nights I dream about Friedrich instead of the war. Dream about that cafe, about his face when he understood, about the moment when the carefully constructed walls between us, between Americans and Germans, between winners and losers, between the living and the dead, came crashing down and left us just 2 broken men staring at each other across a table. My name is Henry Walker, and I enlisted in the Army in 1917 when I was 18 years old. I grew up in rural Kentucky, son of a tobacco farmer who'd never been more than 50 miles from home. When war broke out in Europe, it seemed impossibly far away. Then the Lusitania sank and the Zimmermann telegram, and suddenly we were going over there to fight the Germans who we'd been told were monsters, baby killers, rapists, Huns, less than human. Basic training was at Camp Taylor, just outside Louisville. They taught us to shoot, to march, to follow orders. But mostly, they taught us to hate. Every day was propaganda. Posters of German soldiers bayoneting babies, stories of Belgian nuns being violated, tales of the Kaiser's bloodlust. By the time we shipped out, we believed it. We believed the Germans weren't people, just targets, just the enemy. I arrived in France in May 1918 with the 6th Infantry Division. Went straight into the fighting at Château-Thierry, then the Meuse-Argonne. Spent 6 months learning to kill, learning to survive, lost friends, killed Germans, became the thing they'd trained me to be, a soldier, a weapon, a cog in the machine of war. The armistice came November 11th. We celebrated, drank captured German wine, sang songs, convinced ourselves we'd won something. Then they told us we were staying, occupation duty. We marched into Germany in December, set up positions along the Rhine. I was stationed in Cologne, ancient city with a cathedral that somehow survived the war when so much else didn't. That's where I met Friedrich. 4 months after we stopped shooting. 4 months after the killing ended, but before any of us understood that war doesn't really end, it just stops actively happening. The cafe was called the Goldene Schlüssel, the Golden Key. It was February 1919, and I'd been in Cologne for 2 months. The Germans there were sullen, defeated, hungry. The war had bled them dry, and the blockade was still in effect. They were starving while we had more food than we needed. You could see it in their eyes, hatred mixed with desperation. We weren't supposed to fraternize. Non-fraternization policy, they called it. Don't talk to the Germans, don't make friends, keep your distance. They're the enemy, even if the shooting stopped. But we were bored and young and human, and rules don't always stick when you're occupying a city full of people who look just like the folks back home. I'd started going to the Goldener Schlüssel because the owner, an old man named Herr Schneider, spoke decent English and didn't spit when we walked by like some of the locals did. He'd let American soldiers sit in his cafe even though it meant other Germans wouldn't come in. He needed the money that bad. That day in March was cold and rainy. I went in to get out of the weather, ordered what passed for coffee, roasted acorns mostly, no real coffee beans available. The place was nearly empty. Just me, Herr Schneider, and one other customer in the corner. The man in the corner was young, maybe my age. Thin, wearing a threadbare coat that had probably been German army issue. He was staring into his cup like it held answers. His hands were shaking. I recognized that shake. We all had it. The war shake. The one that came from too much shelling, too much death, too much everything. He looked up and saw me watching. Our eyes met. For a second, I saw recognition there. Not that he knew me specifically, but that he knew what I was. American, occupier, enemy. I should have looked away, should have followed the non-fraternization policy. But something in his face stopped me. He looked how I felt, lost, broken, trying to figure out how to be human again after what we'd been through. "You speak English?" I asked. Herr Schneider started to object, but the young man held up a hand. "Ja? Yes. Some. You were in it? The war?" He nodded slowly. "Meuse-Argonne, October, infantry." My blood went cold. Meuse-Argonne in October. That's where I'd been. Same place, same time. We'd been shooting at each other. "Me too," I said. "American 6th Division." His face changed, something between recognition and horror. I was 28th Reserve Division. We held the lines near. He named a village. I knew it. We'd attacked it, taken it after 3 days of fighting, lost 60 men doing it. We sat there in silence for a moment. The rain pattered against the windows. Herr Schneider pretended to clean glasses behind the counter, staying far away from whatever was happening between us. "May I?" The German gestured at my table. "May I sit?" Every regulation said no. Every bit of training said this was fraternization, this was wrong, this man was the enemy. But I nodded. He came over and sat down across from me. Up close, I could see how gaunt he was. Cheekbones sharp under thin skin, eyes sunken. He'd been starving for months. "My name is Friedrich," he said. "Friedrich Weber." "Henry Walker." We shook hands. His grip was weak. He saw me notice and smiled bitterly. "The blockade. We have no food, no coal. We are winning the peace the same way we won the war." Irony in his voice. Dark humor. We kept meeting after that. Every few days, I'd go to the Goldener Schlüssel, and Friedrich would be there. We'd talk, share stories, try to make sense of what we'd been through. It was against regulations. My sergeant saw me once, told me to knock it off. "He's a Kraut, Walker, the enemy. Don't forget what they did." But what had they done? What had Friedrich done that I hadn't also done? He'd shot at Americans. I'd shot at Germans. He'd thrown grenades. So had I. He'd followed orders, survived, tried to keep his friends alive. Same as me. The difference was we'd won and he'd lost. But sitting across from him, seeing how hollow his eyes were, how thin he'd become, I couldn't feel like a winner. Just another survivor in a world full of ghosts. Friedrich told me about Germany after the war. The starvation, the Spanish flu, the political chaos. People were dying by the thousands, children especially. The blockade meant no food imports, and the harvest had been bad. "They are starving us into accepting the treaty," he said. "The war is over, but the killing continues." I'd seen it. Seen the kids with swollen bellies from malnutrition. Seen the old people too weak to walk. We had warehouses full of food, American supplies, more than we needed. But orders were to let the Germans starve until they signed the treaty, accepted their guilt, agreed to pay reparations. I started bringing food, just scraps at first, bread from my rations, a can of beans, whatever I could spare. Friedrich refused at first. Pride, but pride doesn't fill your stomach. Eventually he took it, and I knew it wasn't just for him. He had a mother, sisters. They were starving too. Other soldiers found out. Some called me a traitor. Said I was helping the enemy, that Germans deserved to starve after what they'd done. But what had they done? Started the war? We'd been told that, but Friedrich said they'd been told the same thing about us. That the Allies were the aggressors, that Germany was defending itself. Someone was lying. Maybe everyone was lying. One night, Friedrich told me about Langemarck. He'd been there in 1917 during Third Ypres. The mud was so bad that wounded men drowned in it. He'd watched his friend slip into a shell crater and couldn't pull him out. He was sinking, Friedrich said. And I was holding his hand, pulling, but the mud was stronger. He begged me not to let go, but I had to. If I held on, I would have gone in too. I told him about the Argonne forest, about finding a German patrol by accident. We'd stumbled into each other in the fog, started shooting before we could think. I'd bayoneted a German soldier, just a kid, couldn't have been 17. I'd killed him up close, felt the blade go in, heard him gasp. His last word was mutter, mother. We are all murderers, Friedrich said quietly. They dressed us in uniforms and gave us rifles and told us it was duty, honor, patriotism. But we are just murderers, and we have to live with that. We talked. I don't know why. Maybe because we were both lonely. Maybe because talking to someone who'd been there, who understood, was easier than pretending to the folks back home that everything was fine. Maybe because some part of both of us needed to see the enemy as human. Friedrich told me about his war. The trenches near Verdun in 1916. The spring offensive in 1918 when they'd pushed the Allies back and thought they might actually win. The slow collapse as American troops kept coming, endless fresh divisions against exhausted Germans who'd been fighting for 4 years. We knew we would lose, he said. By October, everyone knew. But we had to keep fighting, had to keep dying. For what? For the Kaiser? For Germany? I don't know anymore. I told him about my war, Chateau Thierry, the Meuse Argonne, the friends I'd lost. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. We'd been enemies, but we'd fought the same war, seen the same things, been destroyed by the same machine. That village, I said, the one you defended. We took it on October 12th. Friedrich went very still. October 12th. Rough fight. We lost a lot of men. So did we. His voice was flat. My company. We were 140 men. After October 12th, we were 23 inches. The math was simple. American artillery and machine guns had killed over 100 men in Friedrich's company. Maybe I'd killed some of them. Probably had. We'd all been shooting, all been throwing grenades, all been doing our jobs. I had a brother, Friedrich said suddenly. Karl. He was 2 years younger than me. He wanted to be a teacher before the war, mathematics. He was good with numbers. I knew where this was going. Could feel it coming like a shell you hear whistling in. He died October 12th, in that village. We were in the same company, but I couldn't. His voice broke. The shelling was so heavy. And then you came, your soldiers. We fought in the streets, in the buildings. I saw Karl go down, but I couldn't reach him. Too much fire, too much. He stopped, put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. I sat there, frozen. I'd been in that fight. I'd thrown grenades into buildings. I'd shot Germans as they ran through the streets. Any one of those could have been Karl Weber, could have been Friedrich's brother, could have been the younger brother who wanted to teach mathematics, and instead died in a destroyed village for reasons neither of us understood. I'm sorry, I said. The words felt stupid, inadequate. What did sorry mean? Sorry I was part of the army that killed your brother. Sorry we were on opposite sides. Sorry the war happened at all. Friedrich looked up. His eyes were red. Why? You were doing your duty. I was doing mine. Karl was doing his. This is war, yes? This is what we were told to do. But why? The question burst out of me. Why were we killing each other? What did any of it mean? He laughed. It was a horrible sound. You think I know? You think any of us know? They told us we were defending the fatherland. They told you that you were saving democracy. But here we are, and Carl is dead, and your friends are dead. And for what? What changed? What was won? I had no answer. We sat in that cafe in Cologne while the rain fell and the question hung between us like smoke. What had any of it been for? The breaking point came in June. The Treaty of Versailles was being finalized. The terms were harsh. Germany would lose territory, pay massive reparations, accept full blame for the war. The Germans were furious. Friedrich was bitter. They say we must accept war guilt, he told me. Say Germany started it all, that we are responsible for everything. But I was there. I saw how it started. Nobody wanted this. The Kaiser didn't want it. The generals didn't want it. It just happened. Mobilization schedules and railway timetables and treaties, and suddenly millions of men were marching to war and nobody could stop it. They're telling us the same thing, I said, that we fought to stop German aggression, that it was all Germany's fault. And you believe this? I didn't know what I believed anymore. I'd believed the propaganda in 1917, believed the Germans were monsters. But Friedrich wasn't a monster. He was just a man, a broken man who'd lost his brother and his country in any sense that the world made sense. That June day, news came through that Germany had signed the treaty. The cafe was tense, Germans muttering about betrayal, about the stab in the back, about how the politicians had lost what the army had won. Friedrich sat silently, staring at nothing. It's over, he said finally. We lost, you won, and nothing changes. Carl is still dead, your friends are still dead. The world is still broken, but at least now we have a piece of paper that says who to blame. Friedrich, go home, Henry. His voice was flat, dead. Go back to America. Forget this. Forget me. Forget all of it. Because there is no sense to be made. There is no meaning. We killed each other for nothing, and now we pretend there was a reason. But there wasn't. There never was. He stood up to leave. I grabbed his arm. Wait. I dash. He pulled away. What? What can you say? Sorry? Sorry your country helped destroy mine? Sorry you killed my brother? Sorry we wasted 4 years murdering each other? I didn't want to kill your brother. But you did. Maybe not you specifically, but you. America. The Allies. You killed him and millions like him. And we killed yours. And now everyone pretends it mattered. That it was noble. That democracy was saved, or honor was preserved, or civilization was defended. But it was just killing. Just murder. And calling it war doesn't change that. He was crying again. So was I. We stood there in that cafe, two soldiers from opposite sides, both broken by the same war, and there was nothing to say, nothing that could fix it, nothing that could bring back the dead or make sense of the waste. Friedrich left. I sat back down, alone with my ersatz coffee and my guilt and the weight of knowing he was right. We'd murdered each other for nothing, dressed it up in flags and patriotic songs and speeches about duty, but it was murder, and we'd have to live with that forever. I came home in August 1919, shipped back to America, got my discharge, went back to Kentucky. My father threw me a welcome home party. Everyone wanted to hear about the war, about France, about fighting the Germans. I told them what they wanted to hear. Brave stories, noble sacrifices, how we'd saved democracy. I didn't tell them about Friedrich. Didn't tell them I'd befriended a German soldier, that I'd given him food, that I'd cried with him over the pointlessness of it all. Didn't tell them that the enemy had a name and a face and a dead brother who'd wanted to be a mathematics teacher. I tried to find work, tried to settle back into civilian life, but everything felt false. People talked about the war like it had been a great adventure, like we'd gone over and beaten the Hun and come home heroes. They didn't understand, didn't want to understand. I started drinking. Not a lot at first, but it got worse over the years. Whiskey helped dull the memories, helped me stop seeing Friedrich's face, stop hearing his voice saying, "We are all murderers." Helped me forget Karl Weber, who died in a village I helped take, who wanted to teach mathematics and instead became one more statistic. 25 years have passed. Germany's at war again. Different war, different reasons, but the same murder dressed up in flags. And I wonder if Friedrich is still alive. Wonder if he's fighting again. Wonder if he survived the starvation and the chaos and the Treaty of Versailles, only to be dragged into another war. I wonder if he thinks about me, about that cafe in Cologne, about the American soldier who gave him bread and cried with him. I wonder if he's killing Americans again. If some boy from Kentucky, someone like I used to be, is looking at him through a rifle sight, if the wheel is just turning again, grinding up another generation. My wife knows something's wrong with me. I've never told her about Friedrich. How do you explain that you befriended the enemy? That you learned the enemy wasn't really an enemy at all, just another broken man? That everything you were told was a lie? That there were no monsters, just men following orders and trying to survive? I have nightmares, not about combat, about that cafe, about sitting across from Friedrich and realizing we'd been killing each other for nothing, that his brother died for nothing, that my friends died for nothing, that 4 years of slaughter accomplished nothing except making the world angry enough to do it again. People ask me sometimes if I'm proud of my service, if I'm glad I fought. I tell them yes, because that's what they want to hear. But the truth? I'm ashamed. Ashamed that I believed the propaganda. Ashamed that I killed Germans who were no different from me. Ashamed that I was part of a war that accomplished nothing except creating the conditions for another war. Friedrich was right. We are all murderers. We dress it up in duty and honor and patriotism, but it's still murder. And the fact that someone gave us orders and put us in uniforms doesn't change that. I killed Karl Weber. Maybe not with my own hands, but I was there. I was part of it. A young man who wanted to teach mathematics died in a destroyed village, and I helped destroy it. Friedrich lost his brother because of me, because of us, because of a war that nobody wanted but everybody fought. And for what? Germany lost territory, paid reparations, accepted war guilt. And now they're at war again. All that death, all that suffering, all those lives destroyed, mine, Friedrich's, Karl's, millions of others. And it changed nothing. We just created the conditions to do it all over again. That's what haunts me most. Not the killing itself, though that's bad enough, but the pointlessness of it. The crushing, suffocating weight of knowing it was all for nothing. That we destroyed a generation for nothing. That Friedrich and I stood on opposite sides of trenches, shooting at each other for nothing. I still remember his face, thin, gaunt, hollow-eyed. I remember shaking his hand, feeling how weak his grip was. I remember him crying over his dead brother while I sat there knowing I might have killed him. I remember the moment when we both understood that everything we'd been told was a lie, that there was no glory in war, no honor in murder, no sense to be made of any of it. They gave me a medal, Bronze Star for valor. It's in a box somewhere. I don't look at it, because every time I do, I see Friedrich's face. I hear him saying, "We are all murderers." I think about Karl Weber, who never got to teach mathematics, who died for nothing in a war that accomplished nothing. The cafe in Cologne is probably gone now, destroyed in this new war, or maybe just closed, forgotten. Herr Schneider is probably dead. Friedrich, too, maybe. Or maybe he survived, maybe he's out there somewhere, another broken veteran trying to make sense of a senseless world. I hope he survived. I hope he found peace, found a way to live with what we did. But I don't think he did. Because I haven't. And I don't think any of us who really saw it, who really understood what we'd done, ever do. They told us we were enemies. They told us to hate each other, to kill each other, to destroy each other without mercy. And we did. We followed orders and did our duty and killed each other by the millions. But Friedrich wasn't my enemy. He was my brother. Not by blood, but by shared trauma, shared guilt, shared understanding that we'd both been lied to and used and destroyed by forces beyond our control. We sat in a cafe in Cologne and cried together over what we'd done, what we'd lost, what we'd become. His name was Friedrich Weber. I killed his brother Karl, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life. We are all murderers, and no medal, no parade, no patriotic speech can change that. We killed each other for nothing. And the proof sat across from me in a cafe in Cologne, crying over his dead brother while I gave him bread and pretended either of us could ever be whole again. The war ended in 1918. But for Friedrich and me, for all of us who saw what we did, it never ended. We're still there, still killing each other, still trying to understand why, still carrying the weight of all those deaths, all that pointless slaughter, all those lies we believed. I met the enemy, and he was just like me. That's the truth they don't want you to know. That's what makes it impossible to come home.